I'm getting ready to go 530 meters underground. I'm in the small town of Vierecke in Poland's southern Silesia, the country's biggest coal mining region. No other EU member state is as dependent on coal as Poland. Over 90% of its energy comes from coal-fired power stations. Miner Oleg Lesniewski takes me on a tour of his workplace. He tells me he's going to take me into the pit and show me the machines he uses. Oleg is brimming with enthusiasm about his job. When the lift reaches the bottom, we clamber into an underground train. Back in Germany, I use sustainable energy. To me, the idea of coal mining is anything but modern. In fact, this journey underground feels like one back in time. Our train rattles along at 12 kilometers per hour. Oleg tells me he's worked here for 27 years, since 1983. This is my first time underground. En route to the pit, I begin to feel pretty claustrophobic. It's humid, narrow, and I can taste the coal in the air. And it takes us an hour and a half to reach our destination. The further we go, the darker it gets. I have no idea which direction we're headed anymore. I couldn't imagine having to work here day in, day out. I can tell when we've reached shaft 561 by the sheer noise. And there it is, the raw material. Oleg heads the team here. He has to keep an eye on all the miners and check that all the machines work. His father was a miner too. He tells me about the first time he came down a mine, when he was still in school. I couldn't believe there were no windows, he says. But he acclimatized pretty quickly. A lot of the mining is done mechanically, but now and again I see miners working by hand. Working conditions are tough down here. The air is filled with coal dust and dirt, and the ground's really uneven. Mining accidents are not uncommon in Poland, but the miners here seem to love their work all the same. I've never allowed myself to get scared, Oleg says. Most of the people that work here grew up around mining. It's very formative. And financially speaking, they don't fare too badly. The pay isn't brilliant. An average miner earns around 700 euros a month. But after 25 years of work, they've already earned themselves a solid pension, which acts as a big incentive. Many families in the region couldn't imagine a life without mining. Oleg's colleague, Vierecke, tells me he hopes his son will one day work here too. When he's done with school, Vierecke says he's going to study engineering, and soon he'll be stepping into my shoes. Experts say coal is so plentiful in Poland that the Poles could carry on mining for another 200 years. This miner's convinced that coal will never run out in Silesia. It's down to the geological makeup of a place, he says. Some places have coal, others don't. You have to look for it, but it's always there somewhere. But Poland's hanging on to it. Coal is easy to get hold of domestically, so the population doesn't have to be dependent on foreign imports like, say, Russian gas. After 5 hours of darkness, I finally get a glimpse of daylight. A look at Vierecke from above reveals that the mine is quite literally at the center of the town. And the coal-burning power station is just a stone's throw away, where half of the excavated coal is taken for burning. Locals are all invested in the mining industry somehow. Mining shapes both economic and social life here. I meet Oleg's brother, Mirosław, who shows me where the coal's taken once it's above ground. 6,500 tons of the stuff every day. He explains that this is where the coal comes out of the shaft. And it's only any good to us once it's here, he says.
Czyli tu tym szybem wychodzi do góry, nie?
The mine was due for closure 7 years ago because the state lacked the funding for new investment. But the miners took to the streets in protest and wrote to the then Pope John Paul II. It worked. The mine was kept open. Here in Poland, they say that the mining lobby is so big that no government would ever dare interfere. Mirosław is already in retirement and runs an in-house mining museum. He wants to preserve the history of the mines and encourage younger generations to keep on mining. These days, women are allowed to work in the mines too, in theory at least. As yet, none have ever opted to do so. Mirosław's father, Franciszek, is 88 years old. He was a miner too, and over the years, he's collected all sorts of mining memorabilia. I asked the men about the effect of coal mining on the climate. They're well aware of the debate that's raging in the EU. Maybe there is such a thing as global warming, says Mirosław. We're no specialists in that field, but energy supply in Poland hinges on coal. At the moment, we have no alternative. Plans are afoot for a nuclear power plant. But it's a controversial issue in Poland. And the development of renewable energy technology seems to be slow off the ground. So the mine looks set to stay for the foreseeable future. Mirosław, Oleg, and his father invite me to visit them at home. Mirosław shows me old maps and pictures of the mine. He says that life in his hometown would be unimaginable without coal mining. The local economy would have ground to a halt, he says. 1,600 people work in the mine, he explains. And often whole families depend on their wages. Without the mines, 10,000 people would be out of work. And finding alternative work's nearly impossible. There isn't any. But the industry may soon become a burden on the country as a whole. The EU is demanding that Poland pay a hefty levy if it doesn't reduce its carbon emission levels. I really hope that we can strike a deal with the EU, says Mirosław, and that we don't have to pay too much for our CO2 emissions. Surely no one can demand that we stop mining just like that from one day to the next. Oleg adds that the union must surely understand. Later, Mirosław takes me back to the mine, just in time for the shift change. The mine is always abuzz with activity. With 120,000 people across Poland employed in the coal mining industry, many couldn't conceive of living without it.